Warning, this video may contain some material that many parents may find unsuitable for children under the age of 14. Hey, this is Keith from Outlaw Speed Shop, and this week we're going to talk about wheels. There's 8,000 different combinations of wheels, from Greenlight, M2, Hot Wheels, Matchbox, you name it, axle tubes. It can get kind of confusing, and I tend to kind of focus more on stance and wheels and everything else. So I kind of figured I'd do a quick video, take you into my mindset of how I do things and what I do, and sometimes why I do it. So let's get started. So this is the car that I'm going to be using. This is a Hot Wheels Firebird 69. I should know I had one. I already pre-drilled, took it apart. Actually, I haven't taken it apart yet. This is the first time. So, like most cars, interior. Now, the reason the interior is important is there are times, just like this one, where it's got these tabs. And if you notice, these tabs are notched. And even though, actually in this one, a lot of times Hot Wheels will have 3 little tabs. And they're peened over and holding the axles in. The one I happen to grab, of course, is not, and it is using the interior to physically hold down and wedge the axle between the chassis and the interior. So if you're going to do an axle swap, that's one of the things you need to look at. First off is, what are you using? So let's get into that. Actually, really like this casting. Not crazy about the stripes, but anyways, so there's different types of wheels. You've got your monoblock wheels, very similar to Hot Wheels as far as size and everything else. They always come with a little piece of brass or 2 pieces of brass. Very easy to physically work with. Of course, I had to slice my thumb open today, so I can't do anything. So with these, it comes with these pieces of brass. You pretty much can stick it through. You can take a pair of pliers or anything and just kind of, it's so soft, the brass, you can actually just peen it over. Let me see if I can. You pretty much take this, and they have crimpers too that are specifically for this. And you can pretty much just crimp the ends flat. See how it's got a flat spot on it? And that'll prevent the wheel from coming out. Then you can kind of put it in, push it all the way in. You can put your other wheel on and get a measurement. The other way to do it is put both wheels on. Get it in the hole, Keith. There you go. You put both wheels on. Make sure the axle is pushed all the way in, and then you can just pretty much trim this edge flush, and you know you have enough to do whatever you need to do. However, I'm not going to be using, I don't think I'm going to be using these in this particular case, so I don't want to peen them over yet because they're good to work with. So Hot Wheels axles, they're all peened over. You can see they get a nice flush edge. You're never going to get that with most things that you're going to do. So the exact size of these, or as close as I can get, is this K&S .032 music wire, stock number 501. And it comes with a bunch of different ones. Well, 5, 6, 10 pieces. I forget how many, 5 pieces. And I use this all the time. So essentially, and if you don't mind wasting a little bit, and there's really no waste, I guess you could say. You can see how it's all taped at this end. So what I'll do is I'll take a little piece, use a pair of cutters, and that is my axle if I'm going to have to make new axles without axle tubes. So what you can do, essentially, I'm pretending these are Hot Wheels wheels. Actually, I have some. Hold on. Let's see. We'll use, these are Hot Wheels. Cut that. And you can stick that in there and you can see it's perfect. Yeah, so that's the Hot Wheels. You know, these just fit in no problem with this piano wire. You need something a little bit stronger than this to crimp the ends, because this will just cut it, and stuff like this isn't strong enough. I'll usually use I'll take a drift punch, and I'll put this on a piece of steel and I'll punch it down to flatten it. But they do make some really good crimps. I just don't happen to have a pair. So anyways, that's the Hot Wheels stuff. You got stuff like this, which this kit, most of you guys recognize the green light stuff. The axles are pretty much the same size, maybe slightly larger. A lot of times you can cut. And let's see, let's experiment a little bit. And see, these are, for example, these, you go to put them in, these would actually, surprisingly, work. Which is odd, because usually nothing ever lines up. Same thing, you don't have to really do anything with the chassis because it still snaps in. Your wheels will still turn. Not great, because these just a little bit too short. That's the other problem you're going to run into on occasion, is if you look, it's got little tabs. Sometimes they stick out a little bit further, and it allows that to ride right here. So sometimes you got to grind that away just so that it gives it just that little bit of extra clearance. Okay, so you get those, and then you have the M2s. The M2s are a much bigger axle. Okay, thickness wise, if you look, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on camera, but it's almost twice the diameter. So for Hot Wheels wheels and green light wheels, if you can, a lot of times I'll use this K&S 501. I have, and you guys have seen me use this before, Floral stem wire. You can pick this up at Michael's or Hobby Lobby or anywhere. This is 16 gauge. I use this stuff a lot. This is the exact size for M2 wheels. So if you have to make axles, I mean, this stuff you can do. I use it for roll bars too. Let's see if I have a short piece here. This stuff is pretty flexible. You can kind of do what you want with it. It doesn't snap. Of course, that's horrible because I'm doing it real fast, but you can bend it back. You can kind of do whatever you want. It's easy to cut. But they really work well for M2 stuff. If you look, see the size of that hole? Much bigger than Hot Wheels. So I'll use that. Now, axle tubes. Get some of this stuff out of the way here, because I have 2 different sizes I use for axle tubes. You can use brass and you can use aluminum. I use brass most of the time. 5125 from K&S. I believe it's 1/16. Hold on a second, I've got it somewhere. 1/16, actually. If you want to go aluminum, it's 5100, but it's 1/16 tube. And with that, problem is once you open it, they go everywhere. So I'll usually slice it and put a piece of tape. Hold on a second. See, this is why I don't do shit live. All right. So, for example, this is the piano wire. Of course, I can't see anything. There we go. It's going to make a liar out of me. It does fit, trust me. There we go. So it fits perfectly. So that's the 1/16. For the bigger stuff, for like the M2s, let's see, what do we got? I'll use the aluminum number. It's 3/32. The aluminum number is 5101. I do not know the brass number. I don't have it kicking around. I have one piece left, but it's a little bit bigger. And it works just as good on the larger scale. And fits in excellent. I could do this all day. All right, so that's that. So now, that's kind of an overview of all the different types of wheels and stuff I use. I do use Big Time Muscle. Those are pretty much the same size as M2. Muscle Machines, same thing, M2s. Pretty much Greenlight and Hot Wheels are the only ones, in Matchbox are the only ones that are the smaller diameter. So when I take apart a car like this, the big thing that I look for is how am I going to, this is plastic too, by the way. Plastic bases are much easier to work with. Just don't look as good. So I'll look at this and I'll say, okay, how am I going to figure out what I want to do? Well, I know I don't want to use anything I have here. These are just for display. So I have this case of wheels. So I'll take my car and I kind of play around and I do a combination because nothing is ever the same width that you want. It's very rare that you actually find something that works. So I know I want kind of an old school look. Fat tires in the back, fairly thin tires in the front. Back in the day, I guess I'm dating myself, we used to run like wide 50s in the back, 60s in the front, 15s all the way around. So 15.8s, 15.6s. So I know I want some kind of fat. I kind of like the torque thrust look. These almost fit, but they won't. So I can look right now and stretch it across and it won't fit. However, I do kind of like the way that just a very little bit hangs over the edge. Not much. And as it goes further in and up, it's actually almost flush. So I kind of like these, so that's a possibility. And then the fronts, I'm sure are going to be the same thing. Actually, the fronts would probably work perfectly. And then I'll do this just to see how they're going to look. So I could probably get away with the fronts. So the big issue when you do this, and you have to use axle tubes, you're going to raise or lower your axles. By doing so, you're changing the stance. So obviously the lower I go inside this channel, the higher it's going to sit inside the car. So I'm actually slamming it more. Problem being is the more you go up, the more you have to clear product away down here. You got these things right here that if I go too far up, in this case I'm kind of lucky, it'd be semi-flush, but more often than not, by the time you're done, you pretty much got to cut whatever you can out of here because it's going to scrape on the ground because the wheel, it's going to be lower than the wheel. So that's the only other thing you really got to pay attention for. And with axle tubes, it automatically raises it up. So you get a choice. You can either accept that and grind away a little bit here and a little bit here, because it's going to make the wheel sit up higher. And you're going to have to channel this out anyways because you're using an axle tube, which won't fit in this groove. Or you have to lower it here to bring it back and keep the original height. So that's your call. Everybody can do what they want. I don't have a specific way I like things, but I've always tended to slam things. But on a muscle car like this, I'm not going to paint it today, but for the most part, I think I'd want to kind of keep a rake, and I definitely like the fats and the skinnies. Kind of reminds me of when I was in high school, and you know, up here in New England, most of the cars, the leaves or coils and the trunks would all rot out, so the cars are always sitting like dragging ass. So we all had to buy air shocks and jack them all up, because that's the only way we could get it without spending a fortune doing body work. So anyways, so yeah, let's go with this wheel, because you can see right here, it's not going to fit. So my choice here is and the only problem is, see, you get a little channel there. So because it's kind of grooved, I can kind of take away a little bit here and a little bit here and be okay. I can grind a little bit here and a little bit here, and I might get the clearance I want, but this isn't very thick. So I'm thinking an axle tube more than likely will be my best bet. However, on the front, I should be fine. If anything, they're just a tad too long, not something you're really going to notice. I may decide to go with axle tubes, but when you do, just so you know, this groove right here, or the tabs, or whatever cast, again, they're all different. You're going to have to widen here. Let's see, actually I'll show you instead of just talking about it. Let me find a 1/16 here. So here's a 1/16. When I put this in here, I don't know if you can be able to see that, there's a gap, because this will not sit flush. So you have to kind of open that up or accept the fact that it's going to be sitting a little bit higher, which is personal preference and how much it's actually going to fit in the wheel wells. Sometimes the castings don't give you a lot of choice. It's really thick inside here, and you have to grind away, or you got to jack it up a little bit higher. So let me clean up a little bit, and then we'll do some axle tubes so I can show you how I do those. All right, so for axle tubes, this is the rear. Pretty much just put it in there flush. I use a pen. I'm going to mark pretty much flush. And what I do is I'm going to use my Dremel tool. You can use a knife. You can use whatever you'd like. Don't cut it, because if you try to cut it with, the brass is real soft. You can cut it with something like these, but it's going to crush the end. So what I use is a cutoff wheel on my Dremel tool. This gets hot, so you got to be careful. Just a warning. I'm going to cut on the inside. And I'm just going to grind it down a little bit, make it smooth. And that's pretty much it. And then I'm going to take my pick. I'm going to open up the hole. The other side was brand new, so I didn't have to worry about that. And I always keep a spare piece of the piano wire kicking around. And what I'll do is I'll just use that to kind of clean it out. So the next issue you have is when you put the Hot Wheels axles in, you got to glue them. Now you can add a little bit of glue and stick it in there, but the odds are you're going to glue the wheel to the axle tube. So I found, by leaving this piece of piano wire in, I can cut a groove here on each end. So I'm going to use my cutoff wheel. I'm going to grind until I see sparks, and I know I've gone far enough, because it's going to hit the piano wire. All right, so here's the glued axle. You can see where I put glue in both divots that I made. Wheels turn fine. So essentially, the front wheels, I decided I'm going to go ahead and use an axle tube as well. So I got to cut it. And if you remember, these are on the long side. That's why I'm cutting it. So I definitely have to trim these to make sure that they fit. And then I can pretty much just put them in, put it in. Whoop. I'm all thumbs today. Okay. Push your, get the right tool, push your axles in. Make sure you're not pushing the other one out, which I am a little bit, so one of them needs to be trimmed just a tad more. That's why you always check. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put glue in that, let that sit for a second, and then we'll address what we have to do. Alright, so we're going to run into a couple problems. Not problems, but A, this is going to need to be widened here, here, and then here. Same thing on the front, or that's the front, this is the back. And I'm going to have to groove this out to fit the axles. So, take my handy dandy cutoff wheel. As you can see, I'm super precise. Now here, when I put the back wheels in, it rubs against the body, so I definitely need to widen it out to make sure they fit, and I might have to go down a little bit. So, problem with this kind of stuff is you get some dingleberries from the plastic, which you can trim up with a file, trim up with a knife. So then what I'll do, I'll take my body, make sure I get the right height, and you can see I need to go a little bit more. Actually, I might. No, I gotta go a little bit more. Hardest part's getting this level so that the wheels sit flush. Like that. Let's get a true test here. This ugly chrome interior. Yeah, I gotta grind that down a little bit more. See how that doesn't sit flush. That's perfect. See? Let's see where we're at. See, it still hits the top of the fender. So let me do a little bit of this off camera so I don't bore you with any more work that I already have. Alright, so I had to groove this down in the front all the way to keep the wheel from hitting the top of the wheel well. Did the same thing in the back. So I had to lower it just a little bit, but it actually fits perfect. Here, here, gotta do is put it all together. So let me do that, and that'll be it for this video. I know it went a lot longer than expected, so I apologize. Another reason I don't do live or non-voiceover stuff, because I tend to talk too much. So let me put this thing together, and I will show you how it rolls. Alright, so here we are. Everything rolls perfectly. Obviously, if I'm going to do this as a custom, I would paint the base, strip the paint, all that other stuff. But for the purposes of this tutorial, this is kind of what we're at. So this is regular wheels on a Hot Wheels mainline with axle tubes. That's pretty much it. I know this turned out longer than it should have, but sometimes it's a laborious process. And that should cover most of it. I probably will do some more tutorials if I don't get totally destroyed in the comments. I usually don't do tutorials because there's enough people out there that do them. But I figured this was a little bit more in depth. And sometimes we skip over things as YouTubers. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.